Hello everyone and welcome to this video which is in our Human Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're looking together at the fourth game of the women's candidates final match between Tingjie Lei and Zhongyi Tan. Well, I did a preview of this game. Do take a look at it if you haven't seen it yet, but I didn't actually guess things that well. My assumption was from the opening that Zhongyi Tan played in Game 2 that she was going to do anything to avoid Tingjie Lei's favourite Catalan. But in actual fact, that's not how it turned out because, well, just like in the second game, we got 1d4, d5, c4, e6. Tingjie Lei played knight f3 once again. And instead of playing d takes c4, as Zhongyi Tan played in Game 2, quite successfully really, she played knight f6, and after g3 we're into a Catalan. Now the question was, which system was Zhongyi Tan going to play? She played a lot of systems with bishop b4 check, which I played quite a lot, and well, I think they're very, very solid indeed. But she played the old main line, which is bishop e7, bishop g2, castles, castles, and d takes c4. Still very, very popular nowadays. Now there was an interesting wrinkle here because Tingjie Lei didn't play the normal queen c2, and this has pluses and minuses. On the plus side, if black plays a6, then white can play a4, which has been pretty popular at elite level in actual fact. Although in general it doesn't look that amazing for white. However, there is an extra possibility of b5, which is pretty interesting. Has been scoring pretty well for black theoretically. If I'm not mistaken, there was a game in the Carlsen Nepomniachtchi World Championship with this. So the move Queen A4 that Tingjie Lei played avoids this interesting b5 possibility. What it does mean, however, is that after a6, you play queen c4 and then b5, so you haven't been able to play that a4 line. But we're now into a very popular line of the Catalan. Yeah, I've never really been able to get a lot of enthusiasm for this as black. I suppose, you know, what I'm really worried about is that, well, you're playing a6 and b5 very early, and now you've got to achieve c5. But, well, it's not easy to achieve straight away, and there's, you know, if you don't achieve it, you've maybe got a weak c5 square, also maybe a weak c6 square as well. It's just the, yeah, you need to be quite accurate early on, and yeah, you can easily get tricked, I always found. So I was never 100% keen to play this as black. However, if you're well prepared, then in general it should be okay. Now we followed a game between Elianov and Lucas van Foreest in Vacanze 2020, the B section, until move 16 here. So all established theory, bishop d2, bishop e4, we play the bishop, we nudge the queen, and now we get the knight out of the way, hitting the pawn on d4. Bishop e3 protects it, rook c8, eyeing up that c7 to c5 break, rook d1, and now knight d5. Clever little move. If queen takes c6, we've got knight takes c3, I guess. Just wondering all of a sudden, actually, yeah, that's probably what you do, isn't it? Queen takes c4, knight d1, then probably you take on here or something and go c5, something like this. This will probably be quite nice for black. And just suddenly realizing all of a sudden I didn't quite know what the exact refutation was supposed to be. But here white plays knight bd2. Well, black takes on e3, and all of a sudden it looks like white's got a very ugly pawn structure there. But yeah, this bishop is covering the knight on c6. So basically you have to take on f3, and after e takes f3, yeah, this ruining of the pawn structure is just temporary, and white's safe and sound again. So far the game Elianov against Lucas van Foreest. And, well, what is black's idea? Obviously this knight on c6 is hanging. The basic idea is to get the knight out of the way somewhere, and then play c7 to c5 and just repair your pawn structure. That's the basic idea. Lucas van Foreest played knight a5, which is slightly unusual. Got him a draw in the end. Tingjie Lei played the move knight b4, which is also the main engine move. Sorry, Zhongyi Tan played knight b4. So I can imagine that that both players were pretty reasonably prepared for this. So how are you going to stop c7 to c5? The engines were looking mainly at knight e4, That's one thing. But what Tingjie Lei did was very sensible, I thought. A3, knight d5, and then knight b3. I like this move because it's stopping. Well, the knight can come into c5, but the knight can also come into a5 as well. And since the knight's on b3, it's not in the way of a later e3, e4 chasing away the knight. So, yeah, I mean, I like this plan very much. And I imagine that this was still preparation, and I imagine really that it was sort of thought up as an idea that maybe not enough to convince the engine that white's got a big edge, but enough to play with and to cause problems for a human opponent. And I mean, what are those problems? Well, I mean, first of all, there's this rather sensitive square on c6 that black's got to decide, does she want to do anything about this? It's eventually good for a knight, but obviously a queen could also be a little bit irritating there. And we've also got ideas like playing e4 and chasing that knight away from d5. Now it's very interesting to see what the engines think. I mean, the engines think in this position you should simply play c6, and you just don't worry about e4 coming in. This is one game between Dragon and Stockfish. f4, a5, e4, knight f6, knight c5, a4, queen e3, queen c7, bishop f3, rook fd8, rook c1, queen a7, king g2, rook b8, queen c3, draw agreed. The engines really feel that this is just a 0.00 position. Yeah, and it's one of those lines, I think, that where maybe you understand that the engine thinks that, but would I be super happy about playing this as black? Not necessarily, really. I think I'd be a little bit worried, that I might just get squashed and squeezed, really, and that g4 to g5 and a kingside advance might happen. Understand that the d4 pawn's weak. We might be able to get some counterplay with b4 sometimes, but it's not obvious to me that this is just a dead draw. I wouldn't assess this position as just a dead draw. So yeah, I mean, I can imagine that Tingjie Lei might well have just been happy to have played this position and see what you get. Here Zhongyi Tan actually played very, very actively, so avoided this c6 move and played f5. Not one of the engine's favourite moves. I think the point is that the engines feel that white will play f4 at some stage. You want to get this light squared bishop active, and obviously there's plenty of targets along the g2 b7 diagonal, step off targets anyway. So f4 is really what you want to do. And then when you play e4 afterwards, and black plays f takes e4, the damage is so much greater after e4 because we've got this weak pawn on e6, for example, and an open e-file on which you can attack it. So I think the engines are just not very keen about allowing this. For all that, they still see plenty of draws, so that's not bad. But still, the engines feel that this is pretty good for white. It's definitely an improvement compared to the previous move. So Tingjie Lei played a very interesting move here, rook d3, defending the pawn on e3, and that actually carries a threat that Zhongyi Tan chooses to ignore. Again, the engines want to play c6, patching holes in their position, in particular this hole on c6. But Zhongyi Tan played king h8, and I must say during the game I just thought, well, this move rook d3, it defended the pawn on e3. It was really introducing a threat there. It was introducing the threat of queen c6. And that's exactly what Tingjie Lei played, and I assumed really that this was going to be quite a serious advantage. The point is, if you go something like queen d6, then we play knight a5, and white is going to completely clamp down on black's pawn structure with b4 and f4. And then afterwards, well, there's just a lot of light squares you can attack. Yeah, I mean, this was a typical engine game. I'll just show you how it went. f4, not worrying about the exchange of knights there, heading for the opposite coloured bishop ending, and gradually encroaching into black's position. g4 happens. Yeah, black doesn't really want to allow gf maybe, or g5 most likely, so takes it off, and gradually white just increases the position and eventually wins. That pawn on g6 goes eventually, And well, once that pawn on g6 goes, eventually white breaks through. And there's all of these pawns on light squares, which are great targets for this light squared bishop that white exploited. Certainly not easy, needs pretty good technique, but when the engines win all of the games as white, dragons beat stockfish, stockfish beats dragon, then you sort of think, this is a little bit tricky for black. But actually, Zhongyi Tan, I think, had anticipated this and had something very interesting prepared, and that was knight b6. What is the idea? Well, the main idea is that after queen e6, rook f6, the queen's trapped. That's very important. The other interesting thing there is that the knight is heading into c4, and being rather irritating, attacking b2 and e3 there. So yeah, I mean, there's also another thing that black can do, and well, I looked originally at knight a5 because basically, what I wanted to do was to play f4, which is to stop black's next move. But I wasn't really 100% sure what was happening about knight c4 really. So I was still calculating it when Tingjie Lei played the move knight a5, which would have been the first move I'd thought of. But then Zhongyi Tan replied e5, and all of a sudden I wasn't really sure about the position anymore. I wasn't sure whether white was any better. The engine does think that white's better, but again we're definitely heading back into the realm of draws here, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I found it quite awkward to decide on a plan with white. Just in general, what did the engines want to do? They wanted to play f4, and after knight c4 it starts getting quite sharp. Queen a6. We go rook b8 now, and well, this queen's in a little bit of danger, and we're still attacking knight takes b2, but the engines now wanted to play knight a5, and then we got this position, c4 and queen d6. White's a pawn up, opposite coloured bishops, black quite active, and well, white's going to watch out a little bit with the queen, and black can do stuff like g5, plenty of pawns on these dark squares, so if you can just loosen up the white structure a little bit with some exchanges, then this bishop could be quite powerful for getting out the structure. All of my games were ending in draws here from the engines. Actually, the engines were going for some sort of liquidation like this, and yeah, and then proving to hold it. For example, this was one game of was it dragon against stockfish, stockfish against dragon, stockfish against dragon, queen b4, and dragon held this without any problem. 145 moves, tough for a human, but for an engine, not even breaking a sweat there. So yeah, it seems like I think f4 would have been the most interesting move, but yeah, not clear whether it's really leading to winning types of positions. But after knight a5, e5, I was starting to feel just a little bit uncomfortable with white. I mean, yeah, these dark squares, they're all starting to get a bit weak. If this long diagonal gets opened, then b2, a3 could be weak. We've got moves like f4 as well. Just burying this bishop maybe. Who knows? Who knows? Very interesting position now. Well, the engine wanted to do actually what I was looking at. What I was looking at was to play something like this, and then recapture on d4 with the pawn and get a great outpost on e5 for the knight. I wasn't quite sure. This is a little bit more subtle. I was looking to take on d4 just a little bit earlier. I wasn't really quite sure whether you could keep control with white. And well, what the engines were doing, that seemed to be going pretty well really for black. But still, moves like knight e5, black's got to find some accurate moves. Just actually, this was the way that the engines played. Just playing like this, taking lots of pawns, and well, this ended up as a draw in actual fact. But yeah, definitely queen c2 followed by knight c6 would have been very nice. I mean, it's very nice, right? I mean, a move like queen c2, you're threatening d takes e5, and you can claim that this queen c6 maneuver has actually managed to get you a knight on c6, which certainly can't be bad. Yeah, Tingjie Lei played the move rook c1, and it was a bit of an odd move really, because it's one of those moves that you sort of say, well, I'll be prepared for what happens later, but in terms of the immediate situation, you're not doing very much. That rook on d3 is undefended, so you're not threatening d takes c5, and okay, this rook is great on c1 attacking c7, but yeah, black's now got some time to put some more pressure on. I mean, I was on Mastodon, I was live commenting on this, and I was kind of looking at rook f6, the idea being that after de, I go queen d3 takes, and then I give a nice little check which defends this knight on b6, and then go bishop f6, and well, I seem to be a pawn up here, and this rook stops the white queen from doing anything crazy. That was the tactical justification, and yeah, the idea I just thought was that after queen c2, well, we'll do something like this again, I guess, and maybe something like queen f8. This was a game Stockfish against Dragon, and we're threatening both f4 and also c5 as well. I had the feeling that black was quite nicely organised there. But actually what Zhongyi Tan did was also very good, very sensible. Bishop f6, just putting more pressure on here. And here Tingjie Lei took a very radical decision. I'm not too sure about it, but it was definitely interesting. She played the move bishop h3, g6, and then d5, just changing the structure completely, and that really quite shocked me. I hadn't anticipated this happening at all, and actually Zhongyi Tan played very, very quickly, sort of missed this moment in the game. The engines just want to play e4, which to be honest is incredibly natural. Take some bishop b2, rook f1, and I mean, I can imagine that Zhongyi Tan didn't particularly like it because we've got this pin, so white's definitely going to win a pawn here. But basically the engines just say, look, I don't care about the pawn, I've got all these weaknesses to aim at, the position's perfectly safe, this knight's offside as well, this is going to be fine for black. And indeed the engines had no problems at all drawing this regularly. So that would probably have been the very best. But to be honest, I will say that I thought Zhongyi Tan's move bishop g7 was very reasonable, because I assessed this position for black as actually rather awkward for white. These dark squares are incredibly loose in the white position, and we've got the possibility of doubling up quite quickly. This bishop can come to h6. I'm dreaming of getting my knight active somehow, c4 for example. I actually thought that this would be quite tricky for white to handle, and I'm half right, half wrong. The engines are still assessing this as plus 0.8, that's Stockfish at least. So that's like probably a 65% expected score for Leela. So nice white advantage. On the other hand, Tingjie Lei went wrong very, very quickly, and the moves that the engines want to play to keep it all together, to keep the black pieces out of the white position, are quite tough. The engines wanted to play rook c2, rook f7, and then queen c3, and hold it together like that. Or play the move b3 first, bishop f8, and then queen c3. This setup with the rooks covering like this, and the queen assisting as well, not easy at all, to be honest. So I think if you find that, then you've really got an excellent grasp of this position. But I think with in a practical game with time, you need to keep on making decisions. I think it's going to be quite difficult. And here indeed Tingjie Lei played 3 consecutive moves that the engines thought were suboptimal, and actually landed herself in a whole load of trouble just for one move. So queen c2 was played. That's not really helping so much in actual fact, because if the queen's covering only the second rank, then you can imagine you get doubled rooks on there and play a rook to f2. Quite likely that a queen against 2 rooks position might have some awkwardness in it. So rook f7, and now rook f1, very natural, but again the engines feel that you shouldn't be challenging that f file. You should be just waiting. So for example, did we have rook e1, rook f8, and now king g2 was one idea, with the idea of taking back with a rook on e4, for example. This was one idea that the engines were looking at, still with a slight advantage. I think it was Leela that wanted that. But here white played rook f1, Rook f8, and now an absolute blunder here from white, and not at all obvious, but yeah, b3 could have lost the game for Tingjie Lei, and this is really, you know, a dramatic moment in the match, I think. And the nice thing I'm kind of happy about is that, well, on Macedon I was, you know, live commenting on it, and you know, the first move that came to mind and the first move I suggested was knight c8 to d6. You know, this knight is now restricted by this pawn on b3, so let's bring the knight into d6. However, I just caught sight of something, and I had to get it out there just in case I'd found something good. And it turned out that when I checked it with Stockfish, that this was indeed excellent. You take, and then you've got this amazing move, knight d5. And, well, it's this move that really shows that white has actually completely misplaced her pieces. Rook d5, there's queen e3 check. It's not obvious, the geometry. I mean, that's the problem. Yeah, certainly this is geometry that I can miss very easily. So I'm hoping that I'm not the only one, and that it's just yeah, some trickiness in how the position looks somehow. That loses, and if you go e takes d5, then e4 is incredibly strong. The big problem is that rook d2, we go queen e3 check, and rook f2, we've got bishop d4. If you go back to d1, I go check here and check, and well, king g1 allows bishop d4 with a nice mate. And if you move up to the front, then I think I'd said rook f5 was just winning. The amazing thing about it, you know, I was obviously feeling quite chuffed with myself about it. Stockfish basically saying that bishop d2, knight e3 is the best move that white has got, but then yeah, white's just lost a key pawn basically, and black's completely winning. But I also tried it on Leela 1 node just for the sheer hell of it. So that's Leela, no calculation, only evaluation, and Leela found this too. I don't know how on earth can an engine that's not calculating anything, 0 moves ahead, just purely on the quality of evaluation of the position. I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess it's all to do with activation of pieces somehow. You know, this godlike evaluation is finding that. But I was really impressed with that. I thought that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And makes you realize that, you know, what you see in yourself as genius, an engine without any calculation is finding it, you know, quite amazing, quite amazing. So Zhongyi Tan actually thought for 4.5 minutes, and I was sure she was going to find it. I mean, you know, the Chinese are normally, you know, in general, incredibly good tactically, very good tactics. So, you know, I thought knight c8 was a move that you'd play quickly, and I thought if Zhongyi Tan was thinking, she maybe was looking at this sacrifice. I do wonder actually whether she was looking at it, but or whether she felt there was something but didn't quite manage to piece it all together. But yeah, after knight c8, why goes knight b7? And this was pointed out by one of my Macedon followers that yeah, this is a very strong idea for white. This knight c5 to e6. Now, actually, it's almost losing tactically because this actually looks rather nasty. You've got a threat of this, and also queen b6 looks for a moment. I certainly had a gasp of fear. Looks for a moment as if you're losing a piece, but of course the knight can come back to c5. You can support it with b4, so there's nothing wrong here. Now, I mean, I was only looking at lines like bishop g2, you know, keep it tight at the back, bishop g2, king h1, and, you know, you're going to be safe. But Tingjie Lei, you know, I mean, this is really characteristic of both players during this match. They were really going for it. And, yeah, this move bishop h3 really shows that you're, you know, that you're going for it here. Queen b6, knight c5, not protecting the pawn on e4, just going to invade, create some pressure. Knight d6, and then yeah, played this move king h1, which again is pushing it an awful lot. The big problem is that king g2, there's knight c4, because if you go knight d7 to fork these two, I've got this intermezzo knight e3 check, and well, takes is going to be absolutely fine for black. You can't take this pawn because we've got checks all over the place somehow. So but king h1 avoids that. And now it looks as if white's threat is knight d7, only that's not quite the case, because if you go a5, knight d7, then you can go queen f2, for example, or even, I think even rook f2 is pretty decent there as well. So black could actually just wait, play some moves like a5, h5, get the king safe, and then sort of see, well, how is white going to organize himself? As soon as king g2 is played, you play knight c4. So this should be a round equal, I think. But well, rook f7 was played by Zhongyi Tan, and here Tingjie Lei took a gamble. I don't know, whether this was a slightly impulsive decision, maybe. But it's really just, giving your opponent a tempting target and said, do you dare, do you dare? Because bishop e6 allows the rook into f1 check. And, I know from experience, in practical games, it's very hard when you half suspect that your opponent has missed something to resist giving a check like that, even if you have the suspicion that it's bad. I mean, rook f8 in actual fact was the move. Knight d7 we can still go. Well, actually, then we could go rook f1 and queen g1 probably. That would be even better. And if you go king g2, we do our knight c4 trick again. And the fact that the bishop's on the e6, that doesn't make any difference at all. But Zhongyi Tan couldn't resist rook f1 check, and now it's too late to go back. Rook f8, knight d7, we've covered f2 with tempo, so all good for white. So rook a1 was played, and in general this is looking horrifically risky for black. The only thing I was whilst the game was going, there were a little bit of time trouble here, so not that much time to think about it. I was trying to mate black, and I wasn't really sure that I was succeeding, but I had actually missed a few little things. I mean, the move I was looking at mainly, to be honest, was rook f3. Tingjie Lei played queen f2, which is also good. It's just that, it's one of those things, it's always the quick rule of thumb. You just look at your pieces and you say, well, which one has got one move and which one has got two or three? And, well, the rook's only got one move, that's rook f3. But this queen could also come to b2, for example. So, it makes sense to delay, moving it to f2 somehow. But, queen f2 was played by Tingjie Lei, and now rook takes a3. So, this is all on fire, really. I was looking at rook f3, and I wasn't finding a mate somehow, so I was getting a little bit frustrated. I actually had the genius idea of g4, and the idea is to actually go rook h3, and then either queen h4, or to go something like rook h7 check and queen h4, and maybe also to play g5, and just cramp down on this black king. But actually the engines showed a very nice idea here. h6, g5, and now this move queen a5. This is the counterplay. This is why you've gone all the way around. It's not just to grab pawns, but you've actually got some counterplay on the a file as well. And this was supposed to be, basically just a draw. The engines felt that black could hold this. But rook f3 was played, threatening rook f8, and now queen b8 from Zhongyi Tan. h5 was apparently better, but after king h3, white threatening g4, just opening up this king side. So actually the engines wanted to play this position. Not easy for white. The engines, they managed to win it in actual fact. A lot of games. Dragon beat Stockfish, Stockfish beat Dragon. So it is presumably objectively winning for white. But I don't know. I mean, I look at this solid black structure. I look at this great knight on d6, the weak pawn on d4, the passed pawns, this bishop that might get activated. And I'm not 100% confident I could do this somehow. What you do want to do, of course, is to start with g4. And start opening up the king side and try and create some threats. But I mean, certainly in a quick play finish, I would not be, incredibly confident about winning this with white. So I think, if Zhongyi Tan had managed to find that idea, that would have been a very tough practical challenge for Tingjie Lei. But somehow Zhongyi Tan went passive somehow. I think, so queen b8 was played. And here, Tingjie Lei did not play the best move, but still, I think a move that displays excellent understanding of the characteristics of the position, really showed that she was clued into all of the tactics there. Because, the best move was knight d7, queen e8, knight e5, that somebody on Mastodon again asked me about. But I said, well, I'm not sure really. I mean, I'm opening up this diagonal. I mean, obviously you can't take, but that's understood. But you know, I'm activating these pieces and I don't really see a mate. But yeah, maybe I should have just exercised the grey matter just a little bit more, because you know, after a5 we've got this powerful idea: takes on g4, and we're threatening queen h4. And if bishop h6, there's plenty of ideas, but why not play queen b2 and exploit those two pieces somehow? So that would have been really strong. The other point about it is that if you do something like knight e4, then actually this is very strong for white. I wasn't really sure. Again, I wasn't really seeing the mate somehow, but yeah, what the engines do is lovely. I mean, the key point is that this is always going to be quite a dangerous threat. And after queen d8, the engines found some gorgeous ways of getting onto the 7th rank and then getting onto the 8th rank. This is a lovely one, followed by rook e8. Don't think I've ever seen that before, but that's lovely. And you know, obviously white's just completely winning there. So that wasn't the best, but bishop d7 was very strong. I mean, actually, what I hadn't quite realized about this is that white's plan is to simply take on g7 and then hit the rook on a3 and hit the pawn on e5. And you know, if black somehow manages to get the queen round to e7 to defend this pawn on e5, I just play this bishop to e6, and it's just interfering with the queen's protection of e5, and e5 is just impossible to defend. And well, if the queen's taking the e5 pawn, then the black king is in awful trouble there. And that's the basic plan. That's just a really simple plan. And I mean, there were, you know, engine ways to defend, better ways to defend, but I mean, all of them, you know, look pretty unpleasant, really. And yeah, Zhongyi Tan just didn't manage to get a grip of what she needed to do there, but it was incredibly difficult. So I mean, after h6, knight e6 followed. And yeah, the key problem now is that knight f8 is a big threat, you know, and then you're just going to take this pawn, you're clearing away the king's side, and well, I mean, there's real danger there. Even queen g8, we go knight f8 as well. And yeah, these knight takes c4 tricks, you know, they never work really. You just go queen e2, and you're attacking this one. Obviously, black can't take the knight on g6. This was a nice little idea, nice little switchback, bishop f5. And if queen d2, there was knight f4 check, bishop e4, takes, and hey presto, white has come out a piece up. A very nice variation there. But basically, you know, this is just too powerful, really, and this big threat of knight g7 is really killing. So, no, Zhongyi Tan tried some sort of counterplay approach, and I was expecting queen f1, which is actually the engine choice. You know, the idea is just to follow up with something like rook f8, rook f7, or rook f8 and knight g7. But I think you can see how, you know, the patterns that Tingjie Lei had seen in the position, because she played queen b2 really fast, just attacking this one and attacking the e5 pawn and threatening knight g7. And after queen a5, rook f2 came in really fast as well, just stopping this rook a2 and renewing the threat. And after knight e4, this was a gorgeous move, which I hadn't expected. Queen c2. The idea, knight f2, queen g6, just totally winning. All of these black pieces are just helpless to defend the black king. Here, yeah, I guess a blunder took place. I think queen b4 would have been the very best choice you could have had. And then there's many ways of playing. The engine move is d6, and there was also rook e2 as well, which I saw, which is also winning, just chasing the knight away, and then you're going to be taking on g6. Lots and lots of wins there, but queen e1 was not very good because we get rook e2 there, and well, then we're just attacking this knight on e4. Queen c3 was played, queen takes e4, rook b3, queen g6, and yeah, obviously this is pretty bad. We got check here, but now the king's coming into h5 g6 even. We've also got h4 to chase away the bishop, and we've got a lot of pieces around this black king as well, so all very risky. e4, h4 took place, knight d4, and we're threatening bishop f5 check, knight e6. How's that for a nice mate? So king g7, another piece went, and after here, Zhongyi Tan called it a day, because two pieces down, just completely hopeless there. So there we are, a very, very nice game. I mean, first of all, like most of the games so far, theoretically very important. This move, knight b4, very interesting to try out. Yeah, I mean, I think that Tingjie Lei built up a very nice advantage here. Although this resourcefulness from Zhongyi Tan, really, I think, confused White. And, well, so much so that, even though the position was maybe not better for White, it was quite confusing. And just at this moment, this was really the moment where I guess Zhongyi Tan could have won the match, really, virtually, with this incredible sacrifice here. After she missed that chance, still played very well, but yeah, in time pressure, I think a gamble from Tingjie Lei, really a sort of a in-your-face, do you dare sort of challenge. And Zhongyi Tan dared, but unfortunately it wasn't great. But the finish from Tingjie Lei was really impressive. It wasn't the absolute best engine moves, but it showed a lovely appreciation of a lot of the themes in the position, switching to both sides, attacking various targets, and well, the finish was very convincing indeed. So there we are, 2.5, 1.5 for Tingjie Lei after losing the first game of the match, and she's in the driving seat there to win the match and qualify for a World Championship match against Yu Wenjun in June or July, I think. So very soon as well. Lots to look forward to there. So there we are. Well, join me for another video very soon to see what happened in Game 5. Zhongyi Tan White, what did she manage to do? But if you've got a few moments, why not like the video, subscribe to the channel, take a look at my new book, New Chessable Course, Silicon Road to Chess Improvement. Maybe a little bit ahead of its time, I feel, but masses of amazing tips about how to work with engines and how to get the most out of them, and also, yeah, how to learn from the way they play. And otherwise, do stay tuned on this channel for more games from the Women's Candidates Final. Thanks for watching.